Most people are taught that the United States helped stop fascism, but that story leaves out a crucial part of history, a part that shows how ideas about race, law, and land in the U.S. influenced the Nazis and how those ideas still echo in today's politics. To understand this, we have to go back to the invention of race in the 1700s. Race wasn't a natural fact. It was created by leading liberal thinkers of their day, philosophers celebrated for reason, science, and ideas about liberty. But their ideas about universal human rights applied almost exclusively to Europeans. They invented categories like white, black, and red, indigenous, to justify slavery, land theft, genocide, and colonial expansion, all framed as rational, moral, and profitable. These ideas weren't just theoretical. They laid the groundwork for policies like Manifest Destiny, the 19th century belief that the U.S. had a divine right to expand across the continent. Indigenous peoples were labeled red, enslaved Africans were labeled black, and both were treated as obstacles to progress. Race made genocide, theft, and slavery appear justified, necessary even, for economic and national growth. The Monroe Doctrine reinforced this ideology internationally. Originally framed as a warning to European powers to stay out of the Americas, it was quickly used to justify U.S. intervention, coups, and expansion across the hemisphere, claiming moral authority over other nations while protecting U.S. interests. Together, Manifest Destiny and the Monroe Doctrine created a blueprint for conquest, resource extraction, and political domination, a system that persists in various forms to this day. Some of the most influential voices included David Hume, who wrote in 1748 that expletive, and in general, all other species of men are naturally inferior to the whites. Immanuel Kant, who described non-Europeans as naturally incapable of self-government, saying the white race possessed all incentives and talents. Or Voltaire, Blumenbach, and Cuvier, who built on this thinking, categorizing humans and placing Europeans at the top. These thinkers didn't just shape philosophy, they shaped policy. Their ideas provided a moral and intellectual cover for slavery, genocide, and colonization, and they became embedded in law and economics. Fast forward to the United States. The U.S. is a settler colonial state. This isn't just about taking resources, it's about permanent replacement. Indigenous peoples were removed from their land, confined to reservations, and subjected to broken treaties. Law and bureaucracy made this process systematic. It was a functioning proof that entire populations could be dispossessed, controlled, and replaced, all legally. And the influence of these liberal ideas didn't stop in the 18th century. Modern American politics, whether Democratic or Republican, still operates within a framework of liberalism. Free markets, private property, and legal structures that prioritize property over people. Liberalism as an ideology values property above life and is inseparable from white supremacy because it was built to protect the wealth and power of European settlers at the expense of indigenous peoples, Africans, and other colonized groups. The Nazis noticed. Nazi leaders admired the American frontier as a model of racial expansion. Hitler referenced westward expansion and Manifest Destiny as examples of how conquest could be normalized. When the Nazis applied this logic to Lebensraum, the process was chillingly similar. First the map changes, then the people disappear. But it wasn't just land they studied. They also studied U.S. race law. In the early 1930s, Nazi jurist Heinrich Krieger examined Jim Crow laws, segregation, and anti-miscegenation statutes. After returning to Germany, his research influenced the drafting of the Nuremberg laws. At a Nazi legal meeting, one jurist said, "We do the same thing you are doing, but why do you have to say it so explicitly in your laws?" And another replied, "But the Americans put it in their own laws, even more explicitly." Jim Crow wasn't informal prejudice, it was a legal system backed by courts, police, and bureaucracy. Segregation, voter suppression, and restricted citizenship made racial hierarchy enforceable by law, lessons the Nazis studied and adapted. Connecting the dots, we see a clear lineage, the invention of race by leading liberal thinkers enforced through U.S. settler colonialism, Manifest Destiny, and the Monroe Doctrine codified in Jim Crow laws, studied and applied by the Nazis. Violence plus law equals hierarchy. The system worked, and the Nazis took note. understanding this history isn't just about looking backward, it's about seeing the systems that continue to shape the present. Liberalism, with its obsession with property over people, didn't just build the U.S., it created a world where white supremacy is enforced through law, land, and capital. This is why indigenous dispossession continues, why black communities face structural barriers, and why the same logics of conquest still guide foreign intervention today. Movements like land back are not symbolic gestures, they are direct challenges to these systems. Returning land and power to indigenous nations is not charity, it's justice. It's a step toward dismantling the hierarchy that has defined this continent for centuries. If we hope to undo white supremacy and the violence baked into our laws and economy, decolonization isn't optional. It's necessary. This is how we begin to reimagine a world where people matter more than property and where conquest no longer dictates law, policy, or life itself. Thank you for listening.